In this video, I will show you how to track single-page applications or websites with Google Tag Manager. Hey, my name is Julius and welcome to Analytics Mania YouTube channel. If you're new here, I teach people how to work with Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics. So if you want to learn these tools and benefit from them, then subscribe to this channel. Single-page applications can be problematic when it comes to web tracking. They are not regular websites, and just simply adding a tracking code to them might not always work. That's why, in this video, I will show you 3 methods of how to track single-page applications with Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics 4. If you ask me, the most solid and the best solution is the third option. So if you can, choose that one. But every project is different, and you don't always have the needed resources to implement it. That's why I'm also sharing the other 2 methods. Maybe they will be good enough for your project. All right, so we have lots to cover, and let's dive in. First of all, single-page applications doesn't necessarily mean that this is just a website that consists of one page. In many cases, single-page applications look like regular websites, but the thing is that they load only once. And then when you navigate from one page to another, the page never reloads. And as a result, page view tracking in many analytics and marketing tools does not work out of the box. Luckily, Google Analytics 4 has some built-in features as a part of enhanced measurement that are designed to track page views in single-page applications. But that does not work in all the situations. So in this video, I will show you several examples. The one where enhanced measurement is capable of tracking, and then a couple of other examples where you will need to do some additional configuration. So let's start with the first example. Here I have a website. Let's say I will go here. And as you can see, the URL changed, a new content loaded. But in reality, what happened is that there was no page reload. This content was loaded dynamically. And for you to better understand this problem, let's take a look at Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics. So first of all, I have an almost empty Google Tag Manager container. I have just one tag, which is GA4 configuration tag. And just for demonstration purposes, I will disable enhanced measurement in this web stream. So now let me enable the preview and debug mode for that first demo like this, then click start. And here I am on this website. Now, if I go to Tag Assistant, to the preview mode, we will see container loaded, DOM ready, and window loaded. Now let's go to another page by, for example, clicking here. Once I click it, I see that the URL has changed, but here nothing happened. This is because this website is not a regular website. It is a single page application. All the resources of this website were loaded on the initial page load. And now when I'm just, switching between pages, for example, I click here, the URL changes, but the content is just dynamically loaded. The page does not reload itself. And in fact, when it comes to tracking codes, for example, of analytics tools or marketing tools, usually they are activated when the page reloads. So every time you go from one page to another, the page reloads and tracking code is activated once again, and then the page view is tracked. But with single page applications, we get only the first page view. And then, for example, if I hit the refresh button right here, I would get another page view because the page reloaded completely once again. So that is the main tricky part of single page applications when it comes to tracking with Google Analytics. Now, this was a real problem in Google Analytics 3 or Universal Analytics, where we had to, configure additional triggers. But in Google Analytics 4, there is a feature in enhanced measurement. So if we enable it and configure it to track changes based on history events, this checkbox should track when the URL changes, but the page does not reload. So let's check. Right now I have saved and I have enabled enhanced measurement. So let's wait, maybe a couple of seconds just for the changes to go live. And now if I, let's say, go to the home page once again, and in fact, I can even go to the debug view of Google Analytics 4. So if now I go to another page and then go to the preview mode, next to container loaded, DOM ready, and window loaded, I also have a new event, which is history. Now this is pushed to the data layer because the enhanced measurement in Google Analytics 4 is enabled, and also that checkbox that is related to history events. Let me just quickly find it. So because of this checkbox, we are able to start seeing history events in the preview and debug mode. So the history event in the context of websites means that the URL changed, but the page does not reload. And also, since we are dealing with enhanced measurement right here, we not only see the history event in the data layer, but also if we switch to our GA4 view, the property right here, you will see that on this page, when the history event occurred, GA4 automatically tracked a page view. And this is the data of the page view that was sent. So for example, if I go to yet another page, let's say I will go here, and then if I go to the debug view of GA4, we should see a page view coming in soon. And here it is. Here is the page location, and this is the latest page location that we see right here. Also, one more thing that I forgot to mention is that because of how single page applications work, some of the features in enhanced measurement will not work properly. For example, scroll tracking will not work properly, then site search will probably be kind of misleading, so you should disable them as well. And in very rare occasions, if you notice that some clicks on your single page application don't work, this might be a result of some conflict that is caused by outbound clicks and file downloads. So in this case, it is quite a good practice to disable all the enhanced measurement features, but keep this one enabled if you choose to go this path. And then when you disable all of them, hit save. So this is definitely an improvement when it comes to single page application tracking with Google Analytics 4. However, this enhanced measurement stuff doesn't always work. On some websites, it might work. So for example, if it works on this website, well, it's good for us. And we can use that in order to track page views. But on some websites, it just might not work. So let's take a look at another example. Here's another example of some demo website where we have a list of products. And if I click on any of these products, we will see a product detail page that looks something like this. So in this case, take a look at the URL. If I am on the product page, I have product/1 right here. And if I close, there is no product/1. Let's say if I go right here, we will see product/4 and so on. So it looks like the URL is changing. Now let's take a look what happens in the preview and debug mode. So I have already enabled it on this page. And if I go to Tag Assistant, I will see a bunch of history events. So it looks like everything is fine, right? Well, not exactly, because if I switch to GA4 view right here, you will see that the page view was fired only once. There was only one page view request sent to Google Analytics 4, and it was on the initial page load. Now, when it comes to other history events right here, we don't see any page views anymore right here. So for some reason, enhanced measurement is not able to track history change events and send them as page views to Google Analytics 4 in this case. I don't know why, but this is just happening. So in this case, we should disable the enhanced measurement history change tracking in Google Analytics 4, and we will have to configure page view tracking manually with Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager. So I will just quickly disable this part, and then let's see what we can do. So first of all, within, maybe 10, maybe 30 seconds, these changes should go live. So if I refresh this page now, then clear this stream and then switch between products like this, I should not see anything right here. And in fact, I don't, because the history change tracking has now been disabled. So now let's configure everything from the Google Tag Manager side. So go to Google Tag Manager, triggers, and Google Tag Manager has built-in functionality to track URL changes. And this can be done with a trigger type, which is called history change. And then let's name all history change. Click save. Now we have enabled the history change listener. Let's refresh the preview mode and see what is happening in the preview mode right now. So now I'm on the home page. So click one product, click another product, and let's see what we have here. So we have 2 history events. So even though I have clicked only 2 products, it looks like every click initiates 2 history events right here. So let me just click one product and to see if we get 2 additional history events right here. Oh, I get it. So one is for the product list. The other one is for the product detail page. So then there is no problem in this case, because sometimes you will face situations when one page view, one history change actually triggers 2 events right here. So if you face this situation, you should Google multiple history change GTM, and you will find a guide that looks like this. And here you will find a solution how to resolve this issue. I will also post a link to that blog post below the video. So back to our demo. we have a bunch of history events right here. Let's click one and let's see what is happening in the data layer. And we have a bunch of data right here. In fact, we should go to Google Tag Manager and enable all history related variables. So let's go to variables, and in the built-in variables section, click configure and enable all the history variables right here. Then let's refresh the preview mode once again and see what we have here. So I go right here, I see the history event, I click it and I go to variables, and let's see what we have. We have history fragment and nothing else, but history fragment is good because fragment is the part of URL that goes after the hashtag right here. So we have this part. Now, if we check other variables that are related to page, and I mean the two URLs, we have page URL and we have page path. If you take a closer look, you will notice that none of them contains the URL fragment, I mean the new history fragment. Page path returns only the part after the domain before all the parameters, like everything before the question mark and the hashtag and so on. And the page URL contains a lot of things like, the main, page path, URL parameters, but it does not contain the URL fragment. Now, the reason why I am mentioning this is because we will have to override the page URL parameter in Google Analytics 4, I mean page location, and we will have to send it with the history fragment, with this part. Because even if the tag fires, I mean, if we manage to fire the GA4 page view tag on history event right here, it will not send the part that goes after the hashtag. In fact, I can prove it to you right now. If I go to Google Tag Manager, I open my page view tag, I mean the configuration tag, I will set it to fire on both occasions, when the initial page loads or when the URL changes because of the history change. So click save, then I will refresh it. And here I have the initial page load. So on container loaded, I have my configuration tag fired and the page view was sent. And the page URL is this one, I mean the page location. And if I click on the product page, this part is added to the URL. Now, if I go to the Google Tag Manager container, I will see that the history event occurred. My configuration tag has fired once again. I have another page view, but this URL still does not contain the hashtag right here. So we will have to override it additionally. But now I see that I'm going a bit ahead of myself. So first, let's properly track page views, and then we will override the page location parameter. So if I go to Google Tag Manager, I should now remove this history change trigger and save it because, well, usually Google Analytics 4 configuration tag is meant to be fired on a page once, and I mean on the initial page view. So this will fire on all pages, and then when all the subsequent page views occur, and I mean with history change event right here, then we will just send an event called page view, and together with that event we will send the full URL that also includes the hashtag right here. I mean, if the URL changes would not include hashtag, then we would not need to override the page location parameter, but now we do. So let's go to Google Tag Manager, tags, and create a new tag, which is GA4 event. It will use our current configuration tag, and then we have to name it exactly like this, page view, because this is the event name that is tracked automatically by the debug view. So if we want to continue tracking page views, and I'm talking about these history events, then we still have to send the same name, which is page view, and I mean page_view. And then we should configure this tag to fire not on all pages, but on all history change events right here. Your goal here is to make sure that the configuration tag fires first, and then all the subsequent page views that occur with history change events, they would be sent as events, of which name is page view. Click save. Oh, and actually I forgot to overwrite the URL. So now let's go back to the GA4 event, which is page view. And here we should go to event parameters and add row and override parameter page location. So this is the default parameter that Google Analytics 4 tracks every time the event is sent to Google Analytics 4. So for example, if I click on page view, you will see that page location parameter is this one, user engagement, this one, and so on. So now I have to insert a value of a variable that contains the full URL, which includes the HTTPS, the domain, the page path, and all the query parameters, and also the URL fragment, which goes after the hash mark right here. There are several ways how you can tackle this. For example, you might include several variables right here, like, page host name, page path, and so on. But also there is one trick that you can do, and that variable will return the full URL. And I mean really full, with the fragment as well. And that variable is called window.location.href. So below this video, I will post a link to this page where you will have to copy window.location.href, or you will be able just to manually type it. So I will copy it. And then let's go to Google Tag Manager, click on this variable button, click plus icon, then variable configuration. And now we will have to choose a new variable type, which is more advanced. And I explained how to use it in the intermediate/advanced Google Tag Manager course. But in this case, it just makes sense to introduce this variable to you. So I click JavaScript variable and I paste this right here. It must be all lowercase with dots, and I mean, no typos are allowed right here. And then I will name this variable like this. So this variable returns the full URL of the page. Click save, and let's save the tag. And now let's test it. Click preview. And now let's test once again. So we have the initial container loaded. Our page view tag is fired. I mean the configuration tag. Now let's go to the product page and we see the history event. We see that our GA4 event tag has fired. And if we go to the GA4 property, you will see that there are two page views. One was the initial page view because it was fired by the configuration tag. And then we have another page view, which was sent by our event tag. And here we see the URL fragment as well. So this is how the single page application page view tracking works if the enhanced measurement does not help and you have the URL changes that occur something like this. Because if, for example, you're dealing with a website where the URL does not change, but the content changes, then history change trigger will not work because it is looking specifically for URL changes. And also in this case, we had to deal with the hashtag, which is URL fragment. And since Google Analytics does not automatically take this part in the page location parameter, we had to do some additional configurations and we had to override the page location parameter right here. So when the page initially loads, our configuration tag fires, and this tag also sends the page view. But all the subsequent page views that occur with history event, they are tracked with the event tag that sends the page view event. And also we overrode this parameter right here because of the hashtag. Now on some websites, the history change trigger might work a bit differently. For example, in our case, there is no history event on the initial page view. I mean, on the initial page load. So for example, if I now reload the page completely, you will see that there is no history event right here. But now if I navigate to another page, then we will start seeing history events. So in this case, it makes complete sense to use this setup that the configuration tag fires on all pages and it also sends the page view. And then on history change events, we have the page view. But on some websites, when you reload the page, you will have 4 events. You will have these 3 events, and then always by default, you will have one more history event right here. And I want to emphasize that it also can fire on the initial page view right here. So if that is your case, then your configuration should be a bit different. Then you should go to your GA4 configuration tag. You should then disable this checkbox, and because you don't want to send the page view on the container loaded event, but you want to send the page view on all the history change events right here. Because in this hypothetical situation, let's say that the history event fires on the initial page load as well. And then all the history events will be handled by this tag, which will fire on all history change events. Because if you kept this checkbox enabled in that hypothetical situation, then you would have 2 page views on every initial page load. You would have one here and one here. But this is important to keep in mind only if a history event is fired automatically on every initial page load. But on my demo right here, that was not the case. All right, so that was the second example of the single page application tracking when enhanced measurement was not working, but we were able to track page views with the history change trigger in Google Tag Manager. Now let's go to the final example. Here I am on a single page application that does not look good, but let's just for a moment ignore the design and focus on the functionality. So this is the list of 3, let's say, news items, news articles. So if I click on the first one, I go to its internal page, then this is the second item, and then this is the third item. And if you take a closer look, if I click, for example, on this link, the content changes, the URL does not change, and there is no history event in the preview mode. So this means that history change trigger neither in Google Tag Manager nor in enhanced measurement. I'm talking about history tracking in enhanced measurement. It will not work. So in this case, your only best option is to cooperate with a developer and ask a developer to push the data to the data layer every time a view or a content changes in the single page application. So for example, when a visitor moves from one section of the application or of the website to another. So for example, here in the list, I click on this item, the content changes, and then a developer could activate data layer push and some data about this piece of content, for example, page title and fake page URL could be pushed to the data layer because we somehow need to distinguish which page or which section was loaded. So in this case, we have 3 items. So, the URLs could be like, first item, second item, third item, or obviously something more meaningful. And now let's pretend that I'm a developer and you have asked me to push the data to the data layer every time the one, let's say, page or one state of the single page application changes to another. So for example, if I go from the list to a particular list item like here, then data layer push should happen. Obviously, this is just, a fake single page application and I'm not a professional developer. And obviously this is not your responsibility to know where exactly to add the code. This is developer's responsibility. But just for sake of demonstration, I just want to show you like a generic idea of what can be done. But obviously every website is different and the code base is different. Therefore, there is no single copy paste code that will work on any website. So here I have the code, the JavaScript code of the single page application. And it is highly recommended for a developer to include somewhere this line of code. It should be activated at least once. So this means that if the data is pushed to the data layer before Google Tag Manager container snippet is loaded, then that data will still be added to the data layer and everything will work properly. So I have added this line of code once, but obviously a professional developer would probably insert it somewhere else. And then there is a piece of code that is responsible for showing content dynamically on a page. So for example, if I click on any of these items, a method called show is activated and it loads the content. And also in this method, I have added a data layer push where the event is virtual page view. Like this value can be whatever you want. But in this case, the term virtual page view makes sense because there is no real page view. The page does not reload, but visitor navigates from one section to another, or let's say from one virtual page from another virtual page. Therefore, usually the term virtual page view is often met in these type of situations. And then page URL. A page URL parameter is useful because we will send it as page location parameter to GA4. So in this case, I have just for example, added this domain and then the ID of the page, or in this case, ID of the section. So this is ID1, ID2, and ID3. But in your case, a developer will probably have to insert some different code right here. So for example, it will probably be some dynamic key that returns the actual host name of the app. And this CID returns content ID, which, as I've said, is either 1 or 2 or 3. And then it also returns the title. So this title is dynamically taken from the list right here. So this is the first title, this the second title, and the third title. So let me save the code and then let's test whether this is working and we see some data in the preview and debug mode. So let me just refresh the page. Then I will refresh the preview mode. And now let's click the first link and see what happens in the data layer. So click it, then go to the preview mode and you will see default events. And then we have virtual page view. Click it and then you click right here and you will see 3 things that were sent together with this event. Event name, page URL, and page title. This one is always the same. Then this is just for demonstration purposes, but the value of the content I mean, the ID of the content is different. So this is the first one. If I clicked on the second link, the value would be 2. And then, for example, page title is also taken dynamically based on which item in the list was clicked. So let's move to the configuration in Google Tag Manager. Let's create a custom event trigger and 2 data layer variables for this particular parameters. So go to Google Tag Manager, triggers, new, trigger configuration, custom event, and copy virtual page view, case sensitive. So we will use this to fire page view events every time a visitor moves from one section to another section of the page, of the website. Save the trigger, and then let's create 2 data layer variables. Go to variables, then new, data layer variable, then paste this key and name the variable. Let's do the same thing for the page title as well. Click new, then choose data layer variable, and then copy page title. In your case, it might be different. Like, since we're talking about working with a developer, you can ask a developer to push different parameters, like, page underscore URL, just URL, or something else. Therefore, it's fine to name them whatever you want, but in this case, I'm using these 2. Now let's go to tags and see what we can do with the setup. So these 2 tags are from the previous example when we were using history change trigger. But as you have seen, this tag does not fire on all history changes on this particular website because the URL never changes. So I should go to GA4 event page view and then remove that history change trigger. And instead I should use my new virtual page view trigger right here. Then I will have to add 2 parameters, page location and page title. I think it is page title, actually. I should probably check. So I can click on any event right here. And yeah, I see the page location and page title. So page title like this. And then I should insert both data layer variables right here. So page location is page URL and page title is this variable. So far, so good. And the last part we need to decide on is whether we should enable this checkbox or not. So in general, this checkbox is not needed if virtual page view event is activated even on the initial page load. So let's check. If I go to this website, actually I can clear this preview mode. So if I go to this website and refresh it, the question is, will I see the virtual page view event in the preview mode? And indeed I do. So in this case, we don't have to enable this checkbox and our setup will work like this. On container loaded, our configuration tag without a page view will be activated, and on all the subsequent virtual page view events, we'll be firing our GA4 page view event tag. So let's keep it like it is. Then let's test whether this setup works properly. So click page view, page reloads, and then we see that on container loaded, our GA4 config tag fired. Then on the initial virtual page view, our event tag fired. Now, if I go to the first item of the list, another virtual page view fired and it sent another event. And now we can go to the debug view of GA4 and see what is happening. So this is the page view for the list. So this is the initial page view. And then we have another page view for the first item in the list, which is this one. Now, if I go back to the list, let's see what happens then. Here I have the new page view right here, and if I click it, I will see that the page location is once again list. So it looks like everything's working properly, and now you can try to configure this on your own project and then publish your changes live. And that is how you track single page applications with Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics 4. As I've said before, the best option is to cooperate with a developer. So if you can, choose that one. If you found this video useful, hit the thumbs up button below the video because it helps me continue working on this channel. Also, if you want to learn more about Google Tag Manager or Google Analytics 4, consider subscribing to this channel. My name is Julius, this is Analytics Mania, and I'll see you in the next video.